So what we're going to learn is this concept of repetition and how it's boring and how you can start to use this power of non-repetition. So we'll first deal with a factor of line thickness. Now, when we start to look at this picture, well, there's nothing wrong with this picture, but what's the difference between that picture and this picture? So what's the difference between Tintin and Asterix? Let's look at it closely. Let's look at Tintin again. And you'll start to notice one thing very quickly, and that is a factor of line thickness. So that's the difference between what makes Asterix so much more powerful than Tintin. So when you start to look at the line, it's just the same thickness right through. And that's usually because it's drawn with what is called a rapidograph or a rotring pen. And so you get this same thickness. And this is what happens when you're using a pencil or a ballpoint. You're getting the same thickness, and that creates boredom. On the other hand, when you start to use a pen that has some kind of thickness, or a brush, or you start to use your Wacom tablet or your Wacom tablet, whatever you call it, then you start to get what is a factor of thick and thin. Now, some of you might be saying, well, I don't have that kind of technology with me. But if you want your drawings to be more effective, you have to now move to some kind of tool, maybe a pen that you get at your local store that you can use, which goes thick and thin. So as you press down, it goes thicker, and as you leave it, it goes thinner. So thick and thin, that is a lack of repetition. The best way to use it, of course, is with a brush and ink. So if you can get a brush and ink, that's the cheapest way to do it. What's the difference? This is how kids draw. Look how the equal thickness almost makes it extremely boring. And you don't notice this till after you've started looking at the thickness between, or the repetition. So what are you getting is this repetition. It's repetitive in nature. It's just same thickness. It's extremely boring. And then when we start to draw the same character, almost instantly, just with the hair, you can see the difference. There is this something alive in it rather than something dead, which is the repetitive nature. And the point is that a lot of comic strips and stuff are done with the repetitive nature, but a lot of them, the very good ones, are done with the line thickness. So this is just one of the whole concepts of repetition. And we'll learn more about how the whole factor of repetition is boring applies to a whole bunch of things in terms of size, in terms of thickness. But what you're seeing here is this whole factor of, if I start to make something just the same thickness, it gets really boring. So we'll draw them side by side. We'll draw Quattro side by side, and you'll start to see that one looks better than the other simply without any change in the face or the look in the face or anything at all. What you're starting to see is just how different it feels and to you. So then the question arises, how do you decide when to go thick and when to go thin? Well, let's start to draw just a simple house. Now you know how to draw in perspective, somewhat. But we're not really drawing this in perspective. We're just drawing a three-dimensional house. So you're drawing the roof and then the sides of the house. Very simple house. And now we start to put the thickness. Now notice, that's thin, and the other side of the house is thick. And that's thin, and then that's thick. So this is one way that you can start to work on it. That's the top of the house is thin, and that side is thick. And of course the base will be thick as well. Starts off being thin, starts going thicker. So what's really happening is the light is falling from one side. So when the light is falling from the left-hand side, that line is thin. So that's the first way. Light is falling from the left-hand side, So that's thin, the other side is thick. But even if you didn't follow that light principle, which is light is falling from this side or that side, and just started to draw thick and then thinned it out. So that's really what I do most of the time. If you look at most of the cartoons, they start off, if it starts off thin, it goes thick. If it starts off thick, it goes thin. All you're really doing is increasing the pressure on the brush, increasing the pressure on the tablet. Whatever you're doing, you're increasing the pressure, and that creates the dynamism in the image. Now, you may have an objection. You may say, well, Tintin did a whole bunch of things, but he did a whole bunch of other things that you're not doing that makes it non-boring. So repetition is boring. Anything that's repetitive is boring. And what we just saw today was line. So what you need to do is you need to make sure that there is a change, there is some kind of contrast, and do it with line. So practice that for a few days and we'll be back.